Sounds good.
As I have a big old pause in the front of kicking this show off. Hey, everybody, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. And again, after 186, 187 shows, I'm going to let you know that I am Teddy. And the dude with the uber shiny head and the fall chamois shirt he has on is Randy Wood. And our special guest today is Judge Carrie Vickery. And we will introduce our North Carolina District Court judge friend to you in momentarily. But for those that don't know, my business is Burriss Consulting. I teach LinkedIn as a business tool. I love to help people figure out how to do it better than those who are failing miserably because they don't try to do the right things using LinkedIn. They think it's a marketing tool and they forget it's a social networking tool. So if you need help with LinkedIn, I know a dude that you can talk to. He'll help you out. And and I think, Randy, are we good to go? All our ducks are rolling?
Yeah, we are. I think we're up and running on Facebook and LinkedIn. So we are set for another show. What 186?
Something like that. Would you introduce yourself to the audience? Because I don't think that they truly know who you are.
Nah, it's only been 4 years. So one of these days we'll get there. Randy Wooden with Goodwill Industries of Northwest North Carolina, director for our professional center, based here in Winston-Salem. Clients across the country, but most of them are here in the Triad. So if maybe you or someone you know that is in a search, whether it's a proactive search or whether let's just say there's a change in direction in the company. Either way, reach out. We'll get you on the calendar, try to help. Every week, Teddy and I get together on a Wednesday at noon, and we learn things. We have fun along the way, and this is a first. Teddy, I think it's the first time we've had a judge on. I know we've had employment attorneys before, but no judges. So we're going to get the other side of the desk, so to speak, today. But before we get started with the show, if you have comments or questions for our guest, put them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that and turn things over to Teddy Burriss, who's sporting a lovely blue shirt today. Teddy?
And socks, Randy. Make sure everybody knows I am wearing socks. I proved that to you earlier when I yanked my leg up in the air. Almost hurt myself.
Let's go. We'll do it.
Yeah. Cool. So, Carrie Vickery, Carrie, you're Winston area.
I am.
Yeah. And even though you hang out in Kernersville some as well, I've learned today. A district court judge serving Forsyth County, and you started doing that work in November of 2016, I think.
Yes, so I was elected in November of 2016 and then took office January 1st, 2017.
And you and then you were reelected in 2020.
Yes.
And I believe you're are running for election again in 2024.
That's exactly right.
You taught me this a while back. You were on the presidential election journey.
Yeah, I'm on the presidential cycle. So I'm every 4 years and then run on the same cycle as the president.
Yeah. So, and you started your career in 2000 and as a judge in 2009, or your whole career?
So I was in private practice beginning in 2009 when I was licensed. That's when I got my law license.
Okay. All right. Private practice in what state?
Here, North Carolina, in Winston-Salem.
Okay. Real cool. I missed that. I apologize. I missed that. So real cool. Would you introduce yourself a little bit more to our audience? Who is Carrie?
Sure. So I'm Carrie Vickery. I'm a district court judge here serving Forsyth County. I am originally from Rutherford County, which is in the western part of the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew up on a farm, a working farm, not like a Airbnb vacation farm. And then I actually went to high school in Winston-Salem at the School of the Arts. So I boarded because I'm not from Winston-Salem and played the oboe there. I realized that I was not cut out at that point to be a professional oboe player, which was my intention when I went there. But I was simultaneously becoming really interested in politics. And so I went on to Western Carolina for my undergraduate and got a political science degree. And then I went to law school at Elon and was in the first class for the law school. And I graduated in 2009. And then I came to Winston-Salem, back to Winston-Salem, just kind of coincidentally. I got a job and was in private practice at the Holton Law Firm from the time that I got my law license in 2009 until I was elected in 2016 and took the bench.
Yeah. Cool. I always ask the why question. And you said you pivoted from oboe playing the oboe. I remember I was in the band in high school too. And I would never make a career as a saxophone player. I still have one, and I take it out whenever I want to annoy the neighbors, but that's about it. So I always ask the why question. You said you developed an interest in politics. What got that started and led you to the path you're on now? What's your passion for what you do? Yeah.
Sure. So I have an uncle that served in the state senate, so I was somewhat familiar with the political process, and then took, just your basic. I think at the time it was called ELPSA. It was like economic, legal, and political systems in action. So it's just the high school kind of history government class, and just got really interested in politics in that way. So I began working on campaigns when I was 16, and I worked on a campaign for every single election cycle after that, and until I was elected, and it was my own cycle. And so if the why, so there's kind of like two whys. Why did I go to law school? That was, really a marrying of my political interests. I realized that there were a lot of people in politics with law degrees for all kinds of reasons. And so that was kind of my initial interest in going to law school. And then once I began practicing, I really enjoyed my practice. I had, a successful practice and really liked it. But I realized that I would be able to impact more people as a judge. I would see more people. And if I was doing a good job, then my thought was that I would have a positive impact on more people as a judge than I could as a lawyer.
Gotcha.
Real cool. Yeah.
Good deal. Well, Teddy, let's, we want to get
I'll
started.
just say, Carrie, you're the first person I've met that went from being an oboe player to being a judge.
There are not many. It's not the most common track.
Now, do you still have an oboe?
I don't. I sold my oboe, but I always tell people that prior artists or past artists are the best supporters.
Yeah.
There you go.
Cool. So, all right. So when you and I were talking, you helped me realize something that I am not as clear as I could be about the court systems in general.
Sure.
And I asked you to get your crayons out and draw me a map so I can better understand. And you opted not to do that. But if you could, share just a big picture of what is I don't want to say North Carolina, but what's the court system look like as a whole, if you would be so kind?
Sure, no problem. So I'm a state court judge, and so I would contrast that with the federal court system. They've got a pretty similar makeup, but when I'm really talking about the state court system here in North Carolina.
Yeah.
And so you have different divisions. You have the trial court division, and then you have the appellate court division. And I'm a trial court judge. So we have two types of trial court judges in North Carolina. We have district court judges and superior court judges, and that's what makes up the trial court. And then you have the appellate courts, and there's two divisions of that as well. There's the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, and both of those hold court in Raleigh. Whereas the trial court holds court, in particular geographic locations around the state, kind of depending on where their electorate is. Yeah. And the other big difference I would say is that the appellate court is an error correcting court. They don't conduct trials. There's no witnesses there. There's no testimony that's given. Nobody is on the witness stand. What they're looking for is to see if there were particular legal errors conducted by the trial court, not whether they disagree with the trial court, but legal errors.
I got you. Real cool. And you did tell me, I remember I have that, you use that phrase, error correcting. I get that. So, and this structure at the state level, in very similar order applies at the federal level as well.
That's right. Yeah, it's pretty much mirrored at the federal level. It's just there's a few differences, but it's pretty much a mirror of that.
I'm just kind of help me understand. So I guess is it the size and scope or the nature of the charge that gets somebody in front of you versus what if I had like a drunk driving or something like that? Is there a local judge, not a district judge? Is there a smaller?
Well, we have
we
have magistrates court, but they don't hear trials the way that they hear some small claims courts, but they don't hear DWIs. They don't hear criminal trials.
So you would. So if I got a DUI or I had something that was not like a murder, I'm trying to get an idea of, okay, if I do something, who do I see? Who sees me and how does that work? Where do I fit into the picture here? Yeah.
So what I would tell you is that with the law, and you learn this really quickly in law school, there's like the rule and then there's an exception. And that would be the case for describing what the district court hears and what the superior court hears. In general, the district court is going to hear criminal misdemeanors, family law cases, juvenile matters, involuntary commitments, small civil disputes. We also hear felony pleas. But then the superior court will hear felony trials and large and complex civil disputes.
So yeah, your
and then
typical
there's exceptions to all of that.
Your garden variety criminal would see you for
yes,
and, so to speak, versus more of a capital offense or a felony or something that's, I guess,
that's
more
right. We don't. Those trials are done by the superior court. We do have some work that we do on the very front stages of really any crime, but the felony trials are conducted by the superior court.
Okay, good deal.
Good. So I get it now. I appreciate you sharing that. And why did you go as a North Carolina State District Court judge or North Carolina District Court judge versus another area of the court system?
So my practice when I was in private practice was a mix of criminal and civil. It was a little bit of a mix of federal and state. And towards the end of my time in private practice, I was doing mostly civil litigation and primarily family law. So I got my board certified family law specialization from the state bar in 2015. And so I was doing a lot of family law. I was doing complex family law matters. That was really a lot of my practice, and that is heard exclusively by the district court. And I really liked it. And so I wanted to be able to continue to have my hands in that.
I get it. Yeah, absolutely. Really like it is important. Otherwise, you're not excited about putting quote unquote the robe on every day.
That's right.
Yeah. Hey, so. I'm just kind of curious too. I'm sure you have a team of folks that help support you. I mean, I'll use the IT arena. Technology is always changing, and people who are in that field need to keep abreast of the latest and greatest. You can't just sit back and 20 years later expect to still have a job. And I kind of wonder how that parallels with what you do as other cases are decided and laws are passed and so forth. How do you kind of keep up with all that in your role there?
Sure. So there's kind of two parts to that. There's the formal continuing education requirements that we have. We're required to complete 24 hours of continuing education every 2 years. So on a biennium. But in addition to that, there's kind of the informal or self-propelled continuing ed. So I read a lot of cases that are released. I attend, additional continuing ed seminars that I'm invited to. I speak pretty regularly at continuing ed and present. And so all of those things combined help me to really stay abreast, of what's going on, because the law is really constantly changing. There's new things coming out all the time.
Yeah, I just wondered how you keep up with it. Yeah, that's good.
So while Randy and I are reading murder mysteries and horror books and romance novels, you're reading case studies.
Yes, but I'm also reading those things too. So I'm reading the new John Grisham right now.
Oh, cool.
So yeah. I'm reading all of those things too.
Yeah. A diverse set of inputs. Absolutely. That's right. Yeah. Which we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Okay. So Carrie, just draw this picture for us. And by the way, if anybody wants to know more about, district court judge and the life, or questions. And by the way, you can't ask questions about how to get out of trouble and that kind of stuff. But if you want to understand more, drop it in chat and Randy will grab it. The day in life, Carrie. What's the day in life? Because I can't imagine, and I'm being facetious here, that it's got to be way different than the corporate American guy that gets up at 7 o'clock and goes to the gym and comes back and gets a bagel and coffee and gets in the office by 9 o'clock and is there all, takes a martini lunch at 11 till 1 and And then, 4 o'clock or so starts heading, out for the evening. It's got to be way different than that.
It is, and every day is a little bit different. So I'm assigned to hold court every day, and court generally starts at 9:30.
Yeah.
So I'm in the office before that. I have an office in the courthouse. And so I'm in the office before that, getting ready for court, making sure I'm in a good spot, making sure I'm prepared and on time so that I can start court at 9:30. And then we generally have a lunch recess, and then court would go until 5 or until it's done. So there are certainly days that I get done before that in court, but that's not, the end of my work. I have work that I have to do in the office. I have administrative matters that I have to address. And so some days there's more office work, some days there's more work in court. It really just depends on what my docket is like.
It keeps you busy. It's a variety every day too. And I've been called to be on jury duty a 3 times, and thankfully have been able to evade the
Randy, wrong declaration, dude.
Should I not have divulged that? But so for those poor fellas and gals that are sitting out there waiting all day to get called or not, are they likely then to potentially end up in your courtroom?
Sure. So the superior, we do some jury trials, although most of the jury trials are done by the Superior Court.
Yeah. The Superior? Okay.
Yes. So we do what's called bench trials. Primarily, there are some jury trials in district court, but it's primarily a bench trial. So in a bench trial, as the judge, I'm both the judge and the jury. So the jury's role is to determine factual issues. What happened? Who did it? When did they do it? That kind of stuff. And whereas the judge's role is generally to, in a jury trial, the judge's role is generally to rule on objections and then also impose sentencing in a criminal matter. Right. In a bench trial, you do both. So you, as in me, the judge, does both. So I both determine, I hear the evidence, I make the factual determinations, I make the legal decision about whether in a criminal case, whether the person is guilty or not guilty, in the civil case, whether they've, met their burden or not, and then impose sentencing in a criminal case or whatever the appropriate relief is in a civil case.
Yeah. How long, we hear, big trials that go on and the jury can be sequestered or set aside, and it could go on for days or hours or whatever until they reach a decision. With you being the judge and the jury, what kind of turnaround time? I mean, how long do you have to ponder this stuff, or do you kind of have a sense as this thing goes along that if they don't do this, then they're done? I mean, how does that work in your mind?
Yeah, it's totally, it's really case dependent. There are some cases, where I really want to go back and think about it. And so I get to do that. There are also some times where I'm able to rule, on the spot or from the bench where the evidence is done, we're at the end and I know exactly what I'm doing. And so it really just depends. I think that it's more common for me in a civil case, particularly in custody cases or where there's a lot of evidence presented, where I need to take a little bit more time to go back to my office to look through things. The longer the trial is, the more likely I'm going to need some kind of like alone time in my office to kind of sit with the evidence that's been presented. Whereas in a criminal trial, you're generally ruling from the bench as soon as the evidence is concluded.
And you're taking notes along the way as you go through. I don't know if you have to listen to what do we call it, transcription or whatever.
So there's a recording. So there is nothing more painful than listening to a recording of a trial, particularly having to listen to yourself. So I really don't like to do that. I take really careful notes. If it's going to be a long trial, I'll take notes on my computer. If it's short, then I'm taking notes, just by paper and pen.
Hey, Teddy, I'll work in the question about the most interesting.
Hang on, before you grab Todd's question, I need to set that up with a question that I just thought of. So Carrie, these are the cases that you preside over. Do they become public record?
Yes. Okay. So in the North Carolina Constitution, it says that all courts are open to the public. Again, because it's the law, there's the rule, and there's some exceptions. So there are some exceptions to that. For example, juvenile matters are closed to the public. There's some other matters like, related to mental health stuff that's closed to the public. But in general, courts are open to the public, and that's guaranteed by the North Carolina Constitution. You can walk into a courtroom and sit there and watch all day, and that's totally fine. You can go pull files down at the clerk's office, and that's totally fine.
Yeah. I'll work in what I'll call the stupid criminal tricks in some of the oddball cases that you've seen later on. But we did get a question, Teddy. I'll work it in here that Christy had put out. Are you seeing more of an increase in juvenile crimes, perhaps in violent crimes, than maybe in the past? Because it seems like a lot of in the newspaper, we just see shooting after shooting and, young folks. And you just hate to see that. But is that, well, what are you seeing? Are you seeing a rising tide in those numbers of?
Yes, absolutely. And I think there's kind of two reasons for that. One, North Carolina was only the 49th state to raise the juvenile age to 18. And that happened about 2 years ago. So before that, the juvenile age was actually 16. And again, every state except us, and I think Rhode Island, had changed it to 18. So that obviously increased the number of juvenile cases, not because there was necessarily increased crime, but because of that age change. But simultaneously, there has absolutely been an increase in violent crimes in Winston-Salem and in Forsyth County and really across the state and across the country. Yeah. And so that's also increased juvenile crimes, but it's also increased adult violent crimes, particularly those related to firearms.
Yeah.
So back when the old law was there, if they were 17 years old, they were considered to be an adult.
16.
16.
Well, but if they were 17
and 17 year olds,
16 to 17, they were considered to be adults, and now they would be considered juveniles. Okay.
Correct.
So those who are less than 18 today, what court system do they go to?
Juvenile.
Yeah.
With the exception of traffic related matters. Like, again, there's always the rule and the exception. So the exception is traffic related matters. There's also a procedure to remove a juvenile case for a really violent crime to like adult court. And there's a process for that, but it starts as a juvenile case. I get it. Yeah. So, I hate it. And, I mean, maybe, is your percentage of cases more, my words, Carrie, not having any better way of classifying what's floating around in my head, bigger legal issues of people doing the stuff they're not supposed to be doing, or is it more youth, young adults that are making big mistakes or mistakes? It's both. It's both. That would be really, I don't know that there's like a straight answer to that, but it's certainly both. Yeah.
I hate it. So
do you want to work in Don's question?
And I asked Carrie that question about public record before we asked Don's question. So, yeah.
Well, and to distill it down, it's the perception that just basically, if you've got money and power, you got more horsepower in the court. Two-tiered system. So those that really maybe need it but can't afford the representation. Is that a real thing that you see from your perspective, or is that just more of what the media wants to throw out there?
I think I'm not going to say that doesn't exist, because I don't know that that's necessarily like a realistic answer. I do think that just with all things are sensationalized in the media. You do have a constitutional right to counsel in a criminal case, and that's afforded to you and paid for by the state if you can't afford it. And so, if you're charged with a crime and you can't afford a lawyer, then you get a court-appointed lawyer, and they're excellent lawyers. And so from that perspective, there's not a difference between paid and, like hiring your own lawyer and having a court-appointed lawyer, because they do really excellent work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. Good. All right. So, Carrie, you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago, and I asked you if we could chat about it here because it's real for you as well as for the rest of us, and it's about the safety of our court system and our employees of the state. Because there are lots of there are lots of people who just can't accept that their fate is in the hands of a judge or in the hands of a jury, and they go out, and you've seen the press. It happened. Where a judge was murdered.
Just in Maryland, just within the past few weeks.
So, in that context, I know we're in Forsyth County, and this is a great place to grow up, a great place to live and have a business in this area. But how does that make you feel? How do you feel about safety in the respect of your job?
Sure. So it's certainly concerning, and I think it's definitely because things have become more polarized in general.
Yeah.
That has impacted, concerns about safety within the judicial system and for judges. Just within the past, I want to say 12 months, there was the murder of a federal court judge in the Northeast, and then just within the past 2 weeks, there was the murder of a state court judge in Maryland who was presiding, I believe, over a divorce
A
case.
divorce, yeah.
And so, which is, some of the stuff that I hear. And so that is very scary. It's concerning. It is concerning. I mean, it's present. I feel really, I do feel confident in the sense that the sheriff's department provides for security in the courtroom. I know that if I was ever had a particular concerning issue, that either the sheriff's department or the police department would step in. And so I do really appreciate that. I don't want to take that for granted. But certainly it is concerning.
This is just life as it is, and we just have to figure out the best ways for us to be able to continue doing what we know we are right in doing, and hope we have the safety systems in place. So
yes, and I think I would contrast, a judge's role from that of someone who's serving in the General Assembly or the United States Congress or the governor or the president, with they're responsive to their electorate, to the people that vote them in. Whereas it's my job not to do the popular thing. That's my job is not to do what people want me necessarily to do. It's to do what the legally correct thing is to do. And that therefore sets you up for being, at the object of people's ire a little bit more.
Yeah, I get you. And so that made me think about the other question that we talked about earlier as well. And that is, Randy and I chatted about it. And that is you are elected to serve this community, and you are not in a political role. You're there, and help me if I say this wrong, Carrie, but you are there to serve the law. And
that's right.
And so how do you keep your personal, you were raised by a different mama than that other person, or a different daddy, and et cetera, et cetera. How do you keep your personal biases out of your job?
That's a great question. So there's certainly a lot of compartmentalizing, I mean, there are a lot of choices that people make that are not the choices that I would make. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad people. And it certainly doesn't mean that they're not entitled to a fair trial or for an unbiased opinion or ruling from me. And so those are things that, you see both within our Constitution and our laws. And those are things that I just think are so important. They're really sacred, to me, the things that I've learned in law school and that I really hold true. And so holding tight to those and setting aside what my own, personal beliefs are, because my way is not necessarily the right way. It might be the way for me. So, in the same token that I don't think that any of you have murdered anybody, and neither have I, that doesn't mean that someone who's charged with murder isn't entitled to a fair trial.
Yeah, I get it. And, I actually have those, not that my thought processes or decisions impact anyone else's life. But when I listen to what's going on in the context of immigration and abortion, et cetera, I have my very own beliefs in what's right and wrong there. But I am absolutely clear that those are my beliefs, and they impact me, and they don't impact someone else.
And we see those hot topic issues, in court. And so it is really important to be able to put aside and necessary to put aside your own personal beliefs about those so that you can rule fairly and impartially.
Right.
Teddy, if you want to take the halfway break, and after Teddy does that, I'd like to ask, I'm running for an office, but it's a nonpartisan election.
Okay.
And help me understand the how and the why when it comes to running for a justice seat, that it is a party, or at least in some cases, I guess you're tied to a party.
Right.
And so we'll want to kind of unravel some of that. But Teddy, let's take the break. Yep.
Yeah. Hey, you're on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy. Our special guest today is North Carolina District Court Judge Carrie Vickery. The conversation is about the court system and, and the human who sits in that role and how she serves in her capacity to hold people, I'm going to use my words, Carrie, accountable to following the letter of the law. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Thank you for our special guest for being here today. We're learning a lot. Every show we show up, Randy and I show up, we get a little bit freaking smarter, and I'm happy that's happening for Randy and for me.
Perfect. Yeah. So like I said, I'm running for an office and it's a nonpartisan election. So I may or may not be affiliated with a party or be unaffiliated and so forth. But when somebody looks at the ballot, it doesn't say Democrat, Republican, Green Party, doesn't tie me to a party. Help me understand then, when we're voting on judges who are supposed to be what I'll call impartial, what's the why behind party affiliation as we start looking down the ballot?
That is a really good question. I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to answer that question because that was a decision that was made by the North Carolina legislature. So when I ran in 2016, it was nonpartisan for judicial offices. So when I ran in 2016, I did not have a D or an R beside my name. After the 2016 race, the General Assembly decided that that judicial races should be partisan. And to be fair, they were partisan probably 25 years prior to them being nonpartisan. So they were partisan, nonpartisan for a period of about 25 years. In 2018, they became partisan again. And so they've been partisan since 2018. I believe that the General Assembly's kind of general philosophy or justification was that this would help inform voters more about their judges and who they were voting for. That is certainly in stark contrast to the need for judges to be nonpartisan and impartial. And so that's a rub for sure. And so I don't know, and it's still, I don't know that controversial is the right word, but there are a lot of people who disagree with that decision.
Yeah. And I don't care which side of the aisle somebody's on, there's always going to be the, well, I don't want that person, or I really want that person because of what I perceive or how I perceive they will rule. The same thing when creating law and so forth. So, I mean, you can't satisfy everyone, and you'll never get,
No, I would just say that, my political party doesn't impact what I do on a day-to-day basis in the courtroom.
Yeah. I'm with you.
And it shouldn't. It would be inappropriate for it to. So. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yep. Teddy.
Cool. And by the way, Randy, did you get my memo I sent to you that I lined up a bunch of people to come vote for you?
Yeah, a ton of people to vote, all out of state, right? Yeah, I'm running for local office
satire.
Here.
All right. Satire. So,
but thank you, Teddy. Thank you for
dude. I've got your back, man.
It was the thought that counts, though.
Yeah. All right. So, Carrie, this is not a big one. This is an important one. Why should I put thought and make a deliberate decision about which judge to vote for? Because I'm never going to stand in front of you in a court of law, I hope. By the way, I have a note that I may come visit you, but why is it important for me to vote for the judge in my state?
Sure. So judges do such important work. When I've talked about what the things that both the district court, the superior court cover, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court. And while you may not end up in court, your friend may, your neighbor may, your someone in your family may, and you want them to have justice. You want them to have a fair and impartial judge. And that really is the bedrock of our democracy. And so I'm not trying to get too heavy or too dramatic about it, but judges are so incredibly important. And so it's really, really important to vote and to see who's on the ballot, to do some research beyond, for judges now, what the D and the R is that's appearing on there. Because again, that doesn't really play into what judges are doing in the courtroom.
Yeah, I get you. And it's really, great point. I've really never thought about it to this degree before. Who are these judges that are out there making these decisions based on the law Who are they? And it's not so much that can I trust them or not, because I hope I can trust all judges. But maybe, you want to be able to respect the person who's sitting in that chair, and you want to be able to know who they are.
Sure.
Yeah, I get
Is
that.
there Todd had a question about, is there an easy play? I put the word easy in there, where people can see how judges have ruled on cases. I think you said everything's public, but I mean, I don't want to kill, 30 hours sifting through a ton of cases.
Yeah. Yeah. There's not like any great, statewide resource or database on how to pull information on judges. There's some stats that are kept on like very small issues, but not like general rulings.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there's also third-party sites out there that rank judges based on the bias they want us to have. Did I say that out loud, Randy?
There are certainly, different organizations who will provide endorsements during election time, and that can be somewhat helpful. Not always.
Oh, wait a minute. So you just opened the door for me to ask you that question, Carrie. Who's your biggest endorsement for 2024?
I don't have any because I'm hopeful that I won't be opposed. And so then when you're not opposed, that they don't really bother. So
yeah. Teddy can endorse you.
I got you.
You're in.
I would appreciate your endorsement.
As soon as that happens,
let me take a note and send it to my bookkeeper and have her.
Okay. I would love your endorsement, Teddy. Thank you.
Yeah, you're on your way now.
That's right. Carrie, we often
Supreme Court is just about 10 years down the road. So
right.
We often tell people, Carrie, that showing up on Lunch Conversations with Randy and Teddy can be pivotal to your career.
Absolutely.
Hopefully in a positive way. So. So let's see. Chan says he's not going to vote for Randy. Look, you just lost a vote, dude.
Yeah.
So how do I stay aware? You, as a public servant, you need to know what's going on around you. You need to know what's happening around you. You need to know, about, economics, business, community, not that that's going to sway the way you think, but you need to understand your communities. How do you stay aware of the community around you and those that you serve?
So I think that's so important. I think it's really important to know this community that you're serving. And so I do that in a number of different ways. I do volunteer work with a number of nonprofits that touch different parts of the community. I serve on boards that do the same, where my goal is to do the same thing, to impact with different parts of our community that maybe I wouldn't impact or wouldn't see on a regular day-to-day basis. And so just remembering, going back to how do I stay impartial and listen to cases where people aren't making the same decisions that I would make. It's a part of that is also understanding that their lives are not the same path that I have.
Yeah.
They maybe don't have the same opportunities, or they have different opportunities, and that necessitates that they make different choices. And so understanding what that looks like is so important, I think, to really understanding and being a good judge.
What, just out of curiosity, I mean, we all hear the term, it's a small world. And have you had to recuse yourself at times where you've got ties or investments or personal friendships or relatives or whatever
drinking
buddies that might appear in your courtroom?
Sure, that happens from time to time. We have a judicial code of ethics that we are required to follow. We also have to complete a number of different disclosures about like financial interests and all kinds of different things about like our personal life that then become public records, so people can kind of see like where you may have some more interest than others. It's more common for me at this point to have to recuse myself from a case and not hear it, because I have had somebody that I represented in private practice who's now back in the court system in front of me. And so I would not be able to hear their case. So that's the most common reason that I end up having to recuse myself from a case.
Yeah. But also in what I'll call repeat offenders, somebody who has appeared in your court and found them guilty or whatever. So now you're human. And so it goes back to, I guess, the biases. And now they're back in front of you again for the same crime.
That's not a basis for a recusal. It's kind of interesting because then for Forsyth County, we have 11 district court judges. And so it feels like oh, well, you could recuse yourself for that because there's several other people that could hear the case, but the rules for recusal aren't different in urban counties than they are in rural counties where they might have two judges, for example. So it's a lot more difficult, but the rules aren't different. And that's not a required reason for a recusal. Now, if for some reason you heard a case and you just developed, because you're a person, some intense dislike because you heard something really awful and you were like, this person's coming back in front of me and I know the most heinous things about them and there is no way that I could be fair, then that's a different story. I mean, and then you're obligated as a judge to say, I can't hear this case because I can't be fair and I recognize that. But just because you've heard their case before, just because you have found them guilty or heard different types of cases involving them before is not a reason for a recusal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like the fact that you said that you do have, I didn't write down the whole statement. You do have a code of ethics that you're obligated to subscribe to, and you don't challenge that in any way.
That's right.
I'm glad that our North Carolina District Court system has that. I'm wondering, did you disclose the annual yacht tour in Europe on your disclosure? A satire.
No vacations paid for by anybody. So.
What about that Halloween candy? What about last night's Halloween candy? How much was that? And what did you do?
Yeah, it was all given to my daughter.
Yeah, she did not go collect any candy, Randy.
There you go.
She did encourage her daughter to relinquish some to her.
Yeah, she did after she went to bed.
Hey, at some point in here, I want to get, and I think Teddy, we've got another point or two we want to cover here, but I want to get to stupid criminal tricks because I just eat that stuff up. I mean, it's like what the Darwin Awards kind of thing. It's like, how can people be fill in the blank? Do you want to tackle that? You want to tackle that now, Teddy, or you want to?
Well, it's fine. Carrie, do you want to?
You got a couple of them. Come on, you get together with friends and they say, what's new? And you'll go, oh my goodness, you won't believe this. What are some just crazy things that you've seen?
I really wish that I had some off the top of my head. They kind of just run together. Like I hear hundreds of cases a day. And so there are lots of stupid moments where you're like, what in the world? But like the other part of it is, and this is kind of sad, but a lot of these kind of stupid moments are the prompt or the result of mental health issues or substance abuse issues. And so it's like, what were you doing? And then at the same time, it's like,
compassion comes into play there.
Yeah. So there's all kinds of stories, but I just, I struggle kind of to think of one off the top of my head.
Now, do you know Michael Wells, Carrie?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The dad?
Yes, I know both Michael and Mike.
Yeah, I know them both too. And I think Michael Wells Sr. has been on the show.
Yeah.
And matter of fact, so have you ever followed his blog or his stories?
I don't think so.
Well, he has I think it's a blog, or maybe it's a book. It's titled "On the Way to the Courthouse."
Yeah.
Well, maybe I will certainly check it out. Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah, interesting. I don't think he writes to the degree that Randy is trying to pry out of you. But he does have all these stories about being a judge and the people he meets along the way.
Hey, as a kid, I used to watch Perry Mason. So do you ever get guys like me that come in and say, hey, I know the law, I'm going to represent myself?
Yes.
Or I've got a brother-in-law that watched LA Law a couple of times and he goes to court a lot anyway. So as a defendant, so he's going to represent me. Do you get?
Yes, absolutely. People do a lot of Googling. And so then they tell me they found it on, this is what the internet said, or so-and-so told me I should do this, or, all kinds of things. I was hearing something actually yesterday, and a man told me that his friend told him to get a lawyer. And I said, okay, sounds like a great plan. You should do that. But I mean, his legal advice is coming from his friend, who does not have a law degree.
Not from his cousin, Benny?
Probably from him too.
I've seen it on Facebook, so I know it's true.
That's absolutely, we definitely get a lot of that. And
you're
just like, well, that's not the law, and I don't know what else to tell you.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, I can only imagine some of the stories, and I mean, all three of us, we've encountered clients, or in your case, folks in the courtroom that sometimes you shake your head, and again, but it is kind of sad too, because you get that mental illness that creeps in, and maybe dependency issues and other things that cloud people's thinking.
There's a lot of substance abuse issues,
Yeah.
particularly I would say related to property crimes, where you see people stealing, whether they're stealing from a store or stealing from, an individual. And generally that's often, not always, but often to fund some sort of drug habit.
Yeah.
And,
what about interesting? Well, I'm sorry.
Todd wants us to go back to his question. I'll get there in a moment. But Carrie, I mean, we're playing here a little bit because that's what Randy and I do. But the truth is, you have people who stand in front of you who have serious problems, family crises, drug abuse, mental illness, and these are people who truly need you to help guide them through the challenge in the context of the law.
Right.
And that those people truly need your help, and that's important. The ones that we're making light of are probably the ones that who may have known better and made a dumb mistake that they knew they shouldn't have ought to made.
Right.
Yeah, and those are the ones
I would just say that I feel like that is the minority of criminal cases, that there are so many more criminal cases that are prompted by substance abuse or mental health issues, which I'm not suggesting excuses their criminal behavior, because it absolutely doesn't.
Yeah. So, all right. So Todd wants to know, do you have in your memory the most interesting case that ever came before you?
Oh, there's all kinds of stuff. So it kind of depends on how you define interesting. So sometimes, there's cases that are really academically interesting to me, like in a kind of nerdy way, and those are fun to me. So there are also cases that are, interesting because of the personalities involved. And so, like this has been several years ago now, but I remember there was a woman charged with stealing thong underwear from Victoria's Secret and reselling it on the street.
Carrie, careful. There are people in our audience. I don't think so. Go ahead.
That was it. I mean, that was the story. She stole like hundreds of pairs of thong underwear from Victoria's Secret, and then she sold each of them individually on the street.
Now, if anybody in the audience knows who we're talking about, we did not mention their name, and I don't
remember their name.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, and I think you said early on, and even in our previous conversation, that you enjoy this work because every day it's something different, and you never know. And thus, I think you also said you care about doing right by those who stand in front of you.
Yes, and I recognize that. I would just say that I recognize that the decisions I make when I feel like I'm doing the right thing aren't necessarily the decisions that they like.
Yeah. Even that woman who stole that thong underwear, she had to stand. She had to be held accountable.
Teddy, hundreds of pairs.
Todd's commenting back and wants to know if anybody bought any. So
I don't know.
So Carrie, I appreciate you, and I appreciate that you are serious about your job, and you're a real human doing it. That's important.
Well, thank you.
Randy, I got one more question for Carrie that's going to end it, but I'm not ready to ask it yet.
Well, and Todd had a question. Do you sometimes have problems on what side of the decision to make?
Sure. I mean,
it's kind of 50-50. Yeah.
There are certainly, cases where I struggle with the decision to make. And there are times that I go home and I wonder if I really made the right decision. And I'm glad that, I want to still struggle with decisions, and I want to still go home and wonder if I made the right decision, because that means that I'm, to me anyway, thinking about it appropriately. I don't want to be flippant about it. I don't want to be quick about it. I don't want to make, and I'm not suggesting that I go home every night and wonder if I made the right decision, but there are certainly cases that stick with me where I say, I wonder if I did the right thing, or I don't know if I did the right thing, but I did the best I could.
You did, based on the information you had available. Do you ever get, when you get out in public, do you have people who may recognize you? And I'm not saying they harass you, but they may ask you, law questions. Yeah, my cousin told me I should do this, and they see you as a free resource, like Teddy. They
Sure.
asked him about brain surgery and rocket science, and he's
Yes, I do get that sometimes. One
Yeah.
of the, I was talking about that judicial code of ethics. One thing that I'm not able to do is to practice law anymore. So I can't go represent people, even though obviously I have a law license and a law degree. And part of practicing law is giving legal advice. So I can't answer people's questions anymore.
So you're not
And
going
I'm
to
fine
tell
with
me how to deal with that spousal issue I had where
I'm
she
not. I can't do that for you. I can't tell you how to do X, Y, Z.
Yeah, I get that.
No,
Yeah.
there are certainly times that, the decisions that we're making or the cases that I'm hearing make the news. And so then there are, as on occasion, people in the public who will ask me about something they've seen in the newspaper, and that's a little different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Are anyone's in the news recently that we might recognize that case and go, hey, you were part of that?
Not off the top of my head that I can think about.
but I have a tool that'll help me go figure it out. Now that I know that, now that you reminded me that all these court cases are public.
That's right.
Yeah, and I am going to come visit you.
Okay, come on.
I'm going to come visit, and I'll sit in the back of the room, and I promise you I will abide by the rules of the room.
And Teddy,
Good.
she can't fix your parking ticket.
I can't. I don't have anything to do with parking tickets.
I don't.
Chan's asking this question, Carrie. Do your cases get overridden?
So that would be done by an error correcting court. So the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, and the cases that go up are very infrequent. So I think I've had like 2 or 3 that have gone to the Court of Appeals since I've been a judge, and this is, I'm going into my 8th year.
Good.
Okay. When that happens, just curious, when that happens, do they? I think you said they don't bring in witnesses or anything. They just look at the decision. But do they get your input as to the why the decision was made?
So when I enter a decision, I enter what's called an order, and I have to explain in that order why I did what why I'm making the decision I'm making.
So they still they have that input, though. That's where I'm going with it. Yeah. So that makes sense.
So they look at my order, to look for that input.
All right, here's a good one from Don. Mm-hmm. If you had a magic wand, and Carrie, maybe you do, I don't know, but if you had a magic wand,
have a gavel.
Yes, ma'am. What would you change about the legal system?
More funding. More funding. So there's, a number of the people that work in the legal system are state employees. Mm-hmm. And just like teachers are dramatically underpaid, our law enforcement officers are underpaid. We don't have enough law enforcement officers. They have so many openings right now. And other, kind of offices that kind of rotate around the criminal justice system are understaffed, underpaid, more funding.
Yeah, I get it. So, all right, here's my last big question for you. And I know the answer, but I'm only positioned because you and I chatted about it, but I'm only positioning because I know that what your goal is right now is to be reelected in 2014 so you can keep doing what you love to do.
That's right.
That. Beyond that, what would be the normal journey for a district court judge? What would be another step that they would go do?
There's all kinds of different things that people do. People stay district court judges their entire careers, which is a blessing because you have to every 4 years go back to the voters and say, please hire me again. I want to keep doing this. And so that's certainly, the most common path really is to stay in that position and continue to get reelected. And so, because you do have to stand for election every 4 years, it's never a given that you're going to be able to continue in that role. But there's lots of different things. Some people leave, the judicial system. I would say that's uncommon, but happens. We have a mandatory retirement age. So at some point you get to that and you have to retire.
What is that, Carrie?
It's 72 for
I got
trial.
7 more years, Randy.
7? Gotcha.
Yeah, it was 72 for the trial court and 78 for the appellate courts. So I've got a few more years.
Yeah. You do.
A few, yes. Ma'am.
Are you in the new courthouse? Is it?
Yep. So we're in our 2nd week in the new building. Yep. So we moved in throughout the month of October and open to the public last week.
Mm-hmm. Very
Real
cool.
Real cool.
Yep. Yep.
What's the journey? What's the journey? Re-election in 2024. What did I miss? Carrie, did I miss something that you wanted to make sure the audience knew?
I don't think that I missed anything. If there's other questions, and I'm certainly happy to answer those. I mean, I think we've gotten to talk a lot about a lot of the different things, from what judges do to
we're all over
why
the
you
place.
should go out and vote and everything in between. So
if there's one thing that you want to make sure the audience knows, what would that one thing be?
not to forget their judges when it's election time.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, I
So
can't
because
vote for
judges
you.
are on both the presidential cycle and the midterm cycle.
Yeah.
Well, at least
It
when
just
it's
kind of depends on when their term ends.
at least when it's the presidential cycle, you're going to get a bigger turnout.
Yep. So there's both downsides and upsides to being on the presidential cycle. The upside is just the turnout is increased. The big downside is that it's harder to get attention because voter attention is generally on the top of the ballot. So the
federal
presidential
side, yeah.
And so, by contrast, if you run on a midterm cycle, it's a lot easier to get attention because you don't have to compete with the gubernatorial races. There's less races on it, but you have lower turnout.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. Can I be a North Carolina District Court judge? I can't be one in Forsyth, or could I? Do I have to live in town?
You have to have a law degree.
I'll make that up, but do I have to?
You have to be licensed by the state bar and have a law degree, and you have to be a resident of Forsyth County.
Okay, but I can do this in Davie County.
Minus that law degree.
Yes, ma'am.
Minor detail.
I think you're still missing a pretty essential component.
I'm
but
with you.
Yeah, so to be a
watched-
judge, you have to be a licensed attorney.
But he watched Perry Mason growing up, so
Right, so
I don't
that's
see
good
that
enough.
there's
Yeah.
probably just a hop, skip, and a jump to get that law degree.
Yeah.
And Carrie, I watched the series Suits. You don't need to.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that you're not prepared enough. I'm just saying that you don't meet the technical requirements.
Yeah. I just want to understand, with the all parameters being important, do you have to live in the county that you reside in?
You do have a residency requirement.
Got it. So, Carrie, thank you for hanging out with us and
Oh, no
tolerating
problem.
us.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, cool. Randy, you got anything else?
Not really any questions, just a lot of good interaction today with our audience. And so, we also share this through YouTube, podcasts, LinkedIn, Facebook. So it's out there. And I think just as a John Q. Public guy here, who's thankfully not really been justice involved, thankfully, we just don't know what goes on that other side of the desk. And we just, we hope we never have to deal with that. But I think it was really enlightening to learn what you do, typical day, and some of the things that you have to go through to get to do the kind of work that you do and the work that you love to do. I can tell you're really excited about it. So thanks for coming on today. Hey, right, Teddy, next week.
What's up, buddy? Oh, you got next week, man.
I do. I'll have a wall calendar.
I know you do.
So there's a wall calendar right here, and it tells me that we're going to have a Veterans Day show on Wednesday the 8th. Nikkei Roach and Larry Laxton, both veterans, will be on to talk about what life is like when they were in active duty, and then also after they were no longer active, but then going back into civilian life and some of the challenges that veterans face as they make that transition, and some of the resources that are available to assist those that are struggling with that, but also talk about some of the successes and some of the good times that these guys have had, and the brotherhood and the camaraderie. I see Nikkei on social media a lot, hanging out with other vets, and just that brotherhood that is formed in those bonds. So we're going to dive deeper into the life of a veteran next week, and we hope you can join us on the 8th. It'll be day after the election day, Teddy.
Yeah, you'll have your name played out, right? You'll be, So, Carrie, again, thank you very much for joining us, and to our audience and everybody watching, we appreciate you, and hope you get value and some enjoyment out of what we share. And we will see everybody on November 8th. At 11:55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Take care.
Thanks,
Carrie. Bye.
Thanks, Carrie.
Randy, see you later.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.